Norman, our interview with Tom Foley and Bob Michael, they spoke about how moved they were the first time they were sworn in as members of Congress. You first walk on the floor and you're asked to raise your right hand. What were your thoughts on that occasion?
Well, first of all, I was carrying my son, who's 3 years old, and when Carl Albert asked everybody to raise their right hand, so I'm holding Stuart in my left arm, and raising my right arm. And the only thing I could think of at the time was, what's a little kid like you from San Jose, California, doing in a place like this? And I was thinking, it can only happen in a country like the United States of America. It's just hard to imagine that, let's say in 1942, being evacuated from your home, placed on trains under armed guard, transported off to camp, and here some 20-some years later, being able to be sworn in as a member of the Congress.
Now, when that happened, you were 10, 11 years old?
11 years old.
And what was that like? I mean, did you really understand what was happening? I mean, I can't imagine what it could have been like when an entire community is uprooted and then moved off to Wyoming.
And for a 10, 11-year-old kid, it really didn't have the impact. But I've only seen my dad cry 3 times. Once was on the 7th of December, because he couldn't understand why the land of his birth was now attacking the land of his heart. The second time I saw him cry was on the 31st of May, 1942, when we were boarding the trains to leave San Jose to go off to camp. And the third time was 1956, when my mother passed away. But the impact was really on the adults, on my older sisters and my brother. For me as an 11-year-old kid, this was, oh boy, an overnight train ride, a long train ride. And once we got on those trains, there were armed guards at end of each car, so we couldn't move from car to car. But I was wearing my Cub Scout uniform and a baseball glove and baseball bat. And when I got on the train, the MPs confiscated the bat on the basis the bat could be used as a lethal weapon. But I was in my uniform because the families were all going to be confined to one car, and you couldn't move from car to car. So Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts were used as messengers between the cars. So I was in my Cub Scout uniform.
And they had set that up ahead of time?
They had set that up ahead of time.
Wow.
So it was a different impact in terms of an 11-year-old perspective versus my dad, who's, excuse me, insurance business was all of a sudden terminated in February of '42. So, and then my folks had to store everything. We could only carry the luggage that we could take to camp.
So your family was uprooted. Your father's business was just stopped. And how long were you in Wyoming in the camp?
Well, first we went to what were called assembly centers, and what the Army had done was to commandeer all of the racetracks and fairgrounds in Washington, Oregon, and California, because those facilities had built-in living quarters, namely horse stables. So we were going to Santa Anita, the racetrack in Southern California. So this was May of '42, and we were there until November of '42.
Wow. At Santa Anita.
And then in November of '42, we were then transported from Santa Anita, California, to Hart Mountain, Wyoming.